on?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. All right. Welcome to Wednesday night Bible engagement. We are on Jacob, Esau, and God's plan. I'm ready for Joseph, but Jacob and Esau it is. Okay, everybody got what they need: papers and pens and whatnot.
Well, if Pastor would have told you before he left what to preach.
He did. I've just.
No, he didn't. Remember, he forgot.
It's been one of those weeks. Okay. All year long. It's been one of those years, definitely, so far. December 31st started chaos. All right. Jacob, Esau, and God's plan. Who knows the story of Jacob? Hopefully we all somewhat know the story of Jacob. Yeah. All right. After God sent a ram to save Isaac from being sacrificed, Isaac grew to manhood and took a wife of his own. Isaac and Rebekah had twin sons whom they named Jacob and Esau. The session is about the struggle between those two sons. Despite the customs of the day, God used the younger son to carry out his promise and make Abraham and his descendants into a great nation. This is a vivid reminder that each generation and ultimately each person must learn to trust God's plan for themselves. Just can't get to heaven based on mom and dad and grandma and grandpa.
I am still not finding.
So, share about a time in your life when you were so jealous of what another person has that it caused you to do things you now regret. Anybody? Anybody try to keep up with the Joneses? Even when they were younger? Seems like, nope.
No.
I don't know that there was a time I was just so jealous I did something I regret, but there are times where I wanted something so badly I did something I regretted, like, going to debt for a car that I probably shouldn't have, or,
Yeah. Okay, where's the law?
But other than that, sometimes it's, I need a car, so I do what I gotta do, and sometimes it's, I didn't need that expensive a car.
No, but I fell in love.
Yeah, you don't just fall in love with people, sometimes vehicles call your name.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of books call my name. Alright.
It's Jasmine, she'll wonder what we do if we turn up the volume. We can't really turn up the volume, that's it.
It's not loud enough?
Not for Jasmine.
I know how to turn it up on there.
Can you help me find where we're at? No.
On here?
Take that, let's move it over.
Okay, hold on. We gotta go to number 2, but possession. Oh, I can't find it.
That's because you're in Learn again.
Oh.
Oh, you're under family devotions. Okay, what is going on here?
See, I was under it.
There we go.
Okay.
Alrighty. I'm back. Alright, so, as his aged father prepared to bless his oldest son, that's a Jewish custom, they bless their children, they verbally say blessings over them, the oldest son usually gets the bigger blessing. Jacob and his mom Rebekah decided to trick Isaac into blessing Jacob instead. This seemingly simple plan resulted in years of separation and ultimately regret for both brothers before they were reunited many years later. As we watch the video, which I have to get over to, consider these questions. What is something that you waited a long time for or are still waiting? And how did your relationship with God impact your attitude as you waited? God's call. I guess I should have started on that one, huh? We tested this, so it should be loud enough.
I've always thought it's interesting that time feels like it's constantly speeding up. As a child, an hour felt like a lifetime, but as an adult, a year passes by too fast to keep track of it. It seems to be a universal experience that as we look back on our life, the long hours and days compressed together into a blur. Everything feels like it was just yesterday. With our lives constantly accelerating, we've become a people who hate to wait. Waiting is the worst. Time is the greatest commodity because no amount of money or talent can buy you more of it. So when it feels like we're forced to waste it, that's a difficult test to pass. With our plans and our dreams and our long-held promises unfulfilled, waiting may be the greatest test of all. Genesis tells the story of two brothers, Esau and Jacob. Tradition had it that the older brother would earn the family's inheritance and carry on the family's name. Genesis refers to it as his birthright. In this case, it would be the older brother, Esau. But surprisingly, God had told the boy's mother that Esau would end up serving his younger brother, Jacob. That must have come as a shock to both Jacob and his mother. Actually, the two brothers had been born as twins, but the few minutes that made Esau older were enough to secure his place as the traditional head of the family. Those few minutes might as well have been years. The birthright was Esau's, and Jacob was left holding what was starting to feel like an empty promise. When would his brother serve him, and what would that mean? For years, there was no sign of God's promise being fulfilled to Jacob. Esau grew into the role and the expectations of his position. Jacob remained his mother's favorite, but nothing much else. Eventually, they got tired of waiting. Who hasn't felt what they did? What good is a promise if it goes unfulfilled? Maybe there was a way they could get things started. Maybe God was waiting for them to take the initiative. Suddenly, every moment began to look like an opportunity to find their own way. Maybe Esau's birthright was something they could take for themselves. Maybe they could steal a blessing. So they plotted, they manipulated, and they lied. They attempted to bypass the waiting by carrying out their own plan. They took matters into their own hands. They acted for their own benefit. It was crude and it was clumsy, but it worked. Jacob bartered for Esau's birthright, and they deceived Jacob's father and stole his blessing. They got what they wanted, and with it, the family disintegrated into conflict and resentment. Jacob was forced to flee for his life. Once you recognize it, this impatience is all over the Bible. Our ancestors found it as difficult to wait as we do. It's hard to think of a biblical promise that didn't test the patience of its recipient. David put it this way in the Psalms: "How long, O Lord, will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day?" It's so easy to think that things always work out easier for everyone else. No one else feels this stuck. No one else is left wondering and waiting like me. But the Bible is more honest. God's people often wait, and often they dislike it just as much as you do. Trusting God's plans and timings challenge their faith in the same way that it does us. Like them, you have dreams. You have promises that you've held on to for years. You've spent countless nights praying with all of your strength, only to wake up the next morning into the same reality. More waiting. Our world is always looking for ways out of it. We are desperate for convenience and efficiency, and we will gladly pay to jump the line for next day delivery and anything labeled fast acting. But God often works in ways that this world finds uncomfortable. God calls us into the test of waiting. Something interesting happens when we wait. The real test turns out not just to be wasted time. The real test turns out to be trust. Can we trust God enough to offer Him our time? Or do the passing days leave us feeling suspicious that we're better off on our own? And is our impatience worth the consequences? the consequence of forfeiting what God is doing for what we expect, when we expect it. The test of waiting reveals our deepest desires and hopes. Are we waiting for only what we want, or are we waiting for Him? That line is often thin, but discovering what motivates our waiting may be the most important part of the test. What are you really waiting on? Listen.
And I felt personally attacked. I like my 2-day shipping from Amazon. I don't know about y'all, but I enjoy it.
Did they raise your,
Yes, they raised the prices.
yeah, the shipping?
Still on the wrong one. There we go. Alright. So, what's something you waited for a long time, maybe still be waiting for, and how did that waiting impact your relationship with God? Anybody? I've got a few good ones, but
Yeah.
you got one? What you
Yeah.
got?
I waited for a long, long time for my son to find the Lord.
Some of us are still waiting.
Yeah, and you know, it's what it showed me was I don't have any control. I can pray, but you know, I've still got to wait, and it's still up to Him what He does.
Man, control like it's in the next week's lesson. I know that DJ and I waited, what, 7 years for Jasmine to get saved. And while the initial mess is what led us to God, that 7 years was not an easy 7 years. And even then, once we got her, she came to live with us, it was still a lot of trial, a lot of, ups and downs. But, I mean, I remember those 7 years going upstairs in the house in Brook and going into the bathroom, and out the bathroom window you could see over to the direction where Jasmine lived and praying it towards her house, just for her to be safe, for God to help her, to protect her. 7 years is a long time when it's a child, and it's your child,
Yeah.
It was a lot. And so, I mean, that's just one case. I'm still waiting for some promises that I feel like God spoke to me. I don't know how God's timing is not my timing, and He perceives it differently. So what feels like a long time to me is not very long to Him. I know I've got at least one child I'm waiting to come back to God. I've got healings that He's promised me for my family I'm waiting on. So our waiting is different. Alright. Was my attitude always good in that time?
No.
No. And I'll be all very open and honest about it. No.
We all know.
Most of you were there.
I'm just joking with you, Kathy.
No, it wasn't. It was not good because, when you're in the midst of it, and again, this will touch on next week, when you're in the midst of trials and waiting, it's hard to see outside of it. Alright, so early one morning, Thomas, a 9-year-old boy, came across an unwelcome sight when he walked out his back door. His next door neighbor, Sam, was in his own backyard playing with a brand new toy. Paul, does Sam often play with brand new toys that you don't get to play with?
Yeah, that's right.
But it wasn't just any new toy, it was the coveted action figure both boys had been longing to own. Broken-hearted and not just a little jealous, Thomas went back inside and began to cry. Finding his mother upstairs, he threw a tantrum until she agreed to take him to the store and buy the action figure for him. As you might imagine, all the world was right again for Thomas after getting the new toy. It's a silly story, likely one played out in all our lives in one way or another. The problem for Thomas, however, wasn't in wanting the toy. The problem began when problem began with his feeling of jealousy over Sam getting it first. Closer to the heart of the problem is how Thomas successfully manipulated his mother into buying him the toy. But the real problem is not in what Thomas did as much as who he was becoming. Someone driven by jealousy and willing to manipulate those he should be trusting. The real problem isn't that Thomas just didn't trust his parents to make the decision of whether he should even have the toy at all. This theme plays out over and again in Scripture. God, who should be trusted, has a plan for our good, but jealousy of others causes us to fight against God's plan. Is there a time in your childhood you can remember not trusting your parents to make the right decision for you? Think back.
That's a long way.
See, my parents had the belief of if I was going to throw a fit for something, I definitely wasn't getting it. So,
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
and I remember as a mom, my child throwing a fit for something did not usually get them what they wanted.
Nope.
But sometimes attitudes have changed, and I've seen parents like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you thinking? Let's explore what God shows us about his trust through the decisions of Jacob and Esau. The younger one was chosen by God to play a bigger part in his plan of salvation for his creation and the human race. The other was not. Only 3 generations into Abraham's family becoming the nation through whom God's salvation would come to the world, we are already finding enormous problems because people aren't trusting God, his plan, or their role in it. Where did I set my phone? Because it's not going to click on it for me. All right. This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins, but the 2 children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. Why is this happening to me, she asked. And the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become 2 nations. From the very beginning, the 2 nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat, so they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born.
Oh.
Might explain why he didn't do much to reprimand his kids.
Oh, no. I so would reprimand them.
Like Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah were at first unable to bear children together. Through answered prayer, God would not only bless them with 1 son, but 2. Along with the twins came an interesting word from God that would birth nations, and that the older son, Esau, would serve the younger Jacob. It was quite the change, since in that culture, the firstborn was typically given advantages that placed him in the stronger position. Yet for some reason, God chose to go against the cultural norm. Was an example from your life when someone was allowed to do something against the norm? What problems did it cause? And they give examples, but what's something against the norm? 50 years ago, I wouldn't be allowed to teach up here. Well, except in some Pentecostal denominations. We were a little progressive in some areas. But I think all of my daughters, my oldest was the tomboy. So, you know, she didn't care if she was in a dress, she was still going to play football with the boys. And she did. So, I mean, there's, you know, I raised some pretty stubborn kids, but they, you know, I wanted them to be, you know, independent and think for themselves, unless, of course, they were questioning me. So, but, so, I mean, there's obviously areas what's something that went against the norm that you think that somebody did? We have not led boring lives. Come on, people.
Well, Stacy always says that I allowed Frankie to do more than she got to do, which is probably true because she's a girl. And I know that that's wrong, but she's a girl, and he's not.
See,
But in
I had all
return-
girls, so I can't really talk about that, but I do know that
Well-
the older kids say that Megan gets away with murder compared to what they would get away with.
Well, and that's
I'm
true.
a little tired now.
because my grandkids get away with a whole lot more than my kids did. But Frankie he probably did get away with a lot more because Stacy was not outgoing and stuff like he was. He was very outgoing.
Right.
And I can honestly say that, you know, they led two different lives. Probably because of the way I raised them, you know. But they both are good now. Hopefully they'll stay good, you know.
I didn't know how I was gonna survive Kim's teenage years, but then I find out stuff from Tasha that she did. See, the quiet ones you gotta watch out for. They just don't tell you.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well,
David just turned 18 and Mason's gonna be 17 or something. I don't even remember now. Anyway, their stuff, all four of mine, and then we got the little one. And she gives me more grief than any four of them because she's got a mouth.
Jeez, that didn't come through genetics,
I don't
did
know
it?
where that came from.
It can't come through genetics, but she probably did learn it from somebody at my house.
Yeah,
Sure.
yes.
All right, Genesis 27. Jacob steals Esau's blessing. This always cracks me up. The first part where, first off, you know, basically, brother gives him this birthright for soup. I mean, did it really mean that much to him in the first place? But one day when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son." "Yes, Father," Esau replied. "I am an old man now," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I may die. Take your bow and a quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare my favorite dish and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." But Rebekah overheard what Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for the wild game, she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flocks, bring me 2 fine young goats, and I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies.'" All right. So, make sure I stop where I'm supposed to. Even though God spoke a clear word that Jacob would be greater, Rebekah didn't trust God to make this happen. She felt that she needed to control the process using deceit and manipulation. Perhaps we can sympathize with Rebekah that it was hard for her to see how God's salvation would really come through this tiny family. But even though God's plan seemed impossible, Rebekah should have trusted God. Have you ever wanted to help God out in a situation rather than trusting Him to resolve it?
Yes.
And how did that go for you?
That didn't turn out
Well, it
so
didn't turn
well.
out the way I wanted it, but
It never turns out the way we want. Why is it so hard for us to trust God beyond what we can see or understand? Man, this all goes into next week, Betty.
I don't think that it's not that I'll just speak for me. It's not that I don't trust him to do it. I would like it done now. You know, And- when it's not, then I have to wait, and I don't like the waiting. But, you know,
We want to control
when when
how
you,
it happens.
yeah, when you go to help him out, it ain't gonna work neither.
Nope.
He doesn't need our help.
No.
Though sometimes I think we think, oh, God must have forgotten about this, and I'll just do this.
Yeah.
But just speed things up a little bit.
We don't even think about it in those terms. We're not thinking that far ahead. You're just thinking,
No, we're just gonna
this
do
is
it.
how I need it to go, and it's gonna happen whether anybody, including God, likes it or not. And then we, make mistakes. And do things we shouldn't do. Geez, my best answer for that, I can't even tell you how many times I thought I could control a situation I really should have kept my nose out of, or not pushed. My husband will tell you there's a while I was really good at pushing when I shouldn't have, right, babe?
Did she push you
Kathy.
just a little?
Yes, I did. And you know what?
See?
It didn't work.
You don't.
And you know what? I got called out for it. And that's alright.
Yeah.
Alright. Then he deceives his dad. So, you really wonder about this family where they're basing everything on lies. But Jacob replied, okay, so he's deceiving his dad. So Jacob took the food to his father. My father asked. Yes, my son, Isaac answered. Who are you, Esau or Jacob? Jacob replied, it's Esau, your firstborn son. Anybody else wonder if he went, it's Esau, your firstborn son? Tried to disguise his voice. I've done as you have told me. Here's the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing. Isaac asked, how did you find it so quickly, my son? The Lord, your God, put it in my path, Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come closer so I can touch you and make sure you really are Esau. So Jacob went closer to his father and Isaac touched him. The voice is Jacob, but the hands are Esau's, Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. But are you really my son Esau, he asked. Yes, I am, Jacob replied. Then Isaac said, now my son, bring me the wild game, let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing. So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Yeah, so, if he's not deceived by anything else, let's mess with his cognition and see if he recognizes him.
You can do that really easy with twins.
Well, they weren't identical.
Well,
One was kind of hairy and slobbery.
The Bible never says slobbery.
my cousin's wasn't identical, but the teachers didn't know that.
Yeah. So 5 times Isaac asked Jacob to prove.
So you have to take her or she's going to get in trouble.
Oh. Baby alert.
She don't sit still.
5 times Isaac asked Jacob to prove who he was. Isaac was obviously suspicious. Maybe Isaac knew that his wife was capable of deception since they had schemed together to deceive the king of the Philistines some years earlier. So it's not the first time that, deception had entered in.
That last movie was a long time ago.
Alright. Whatever the reason, the facts did not add up in Isaac's mind. However, with each response, Jacob deceived and lied even more. If he had any doubts about whether to complete this ruse, he was too far in to turn back now. So when you were a kid, did you ever try covering up wrongdoing only realize deception took you farther than you intended to go?
Absolutely. I always tried to cover up what I'd done wrong.
But then you gotta lie to cover for the lie.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Because after you try to cover it up the first time and your dad knows, there's no more lying.
Oh yeah.
So
So he's like Isaac knew.
they knew
Yeah, I
me,
don't
right?
believe that.
Yeah, they knew me too well.
See, I would try to stick with it.
Now,
Until
see,
I
Betty
was buried.
Jim could do that, but I don't mean nothing bad by that. But she was always a good kid. But when she would do something wrong, she knew how to hide it.
Well, yeah,
I didn't, and I should have.
yeah.
And
I-
Johnny
I-
didn't.
I could usually
we always
hide it.
got caught doing
I
whatever.
well, I got caught a couple times. Most of the time, I could hide it.
Yeah.
Most of the times.
Don't jump off the barn. What do? We jump off the barn and he's looking out the window. I mean, it's like, we get caught.
Yeah, well, I got pretty lucky in that I could somewhat get away with stuff because most of the time I didn't get in trouble. So when I did so well. Alright, 27:30 to 38. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, "Sit out, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing." But Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" Esau replied, "It's your son, your firstborn, Esau." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "Then who just served me wild game? I've already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand." When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here and he tricked me. He has taken away your blessing." Esau exclaimed, "No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me?" Isaac said to Esau, "I have made Jacob your master and have declared that all his brothers will be his servants. I have guaranteed him an abundance of grain and wine. What is left for me to give you, my son?" Esau pleaded, "But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too." Then Esau broke down and wept. And then from that time on, Esau hated Jacob because their father had given Jacob the blessing. And Esau began to scheme. "I will soon be mourning my father's death, then I will kill my brother Jacob." Okay.
Yours is, mine's not with yours tonight. This is the first time it's not been with the story.
Alright.
Bible.
Yeah, it's the verses.
I know, but it's not the same in mine, is it?
Do you have it on a different translation maybe?
No?
It's important to note that God's plans were not thwarted by Rebekah and Jacob's deceit. God's sovereign plan will be accomplished, but how much unnecessary pain was caused. It makes us wonder, if they hadn't tricked Isaac, how would God have caused Jacob to lead Esau? The Jewish people are so serious about their blessings that when they say it, it cannot be taken back. They make a point of, on the Sabbath, at sundown, when they have their Sabbath meal, the head of the family will bless each member of the family, including his wife, and those blessings stand. I don't know if they still give the bigger blessing to the first child, but they believe that much in the power of our words. That what we speak out over people's lives will come to pass. That's why they believe strongly in blessing their children, blessing their wives. We have no way of knowing, but knowing the character of our loving God, we can safely say it would not have caused the pain Esau felt in this moment. Would it have led him to want to kill Jacob instead of serving him? Almost certainly not. Rebekah and Jacob's lack of trust in God's ability to bring about his plan had a devastating fallout. People were hurt and a family was destroyed. Think back to the earlier questions about problems caused by situations that went against the norm. How might this situation have worked itself out in a positive way that those involved could not have anticipated? And how did interference in the situation complicate matters more than necessary? How could it have gone differently? Just reading the sixth. How could it have gone differently if you think about it? How could it have been different for if they hadn't schemed and the blessing went to Esau? Would have, even if Jacob blessed, or if Isaac blessed Esau and gave him the greater blessing, it would not have been able to go against what God had said when Rebekah was pregnant with these boys. So, how would it have been different? Jacob wouldn't have had to run for his life.
There wouldn't have been the hatred.
There wouldn't have been the hatred and the animosity in the family. And we don't know how old they were here, but, I mean, back then, teenagers were out, you know, hunting, they, you know, you were a child or an adult, there was no teen, there was no in between, there was, you know, and so we don't know how old they were, but it's safe to say they were grown, and Jacob should have known better, but then, so should his mother. So, you know, the way she kind of manipulated the whole situation in the background kind of helped lead to all of it too.
Well, it sounds like she probably showed a lot of favoritism. That's like one was for one, and that always causes problems.
That always causes problems, yeah. Although if you ask my children, I have a favorite, and I don't agree with them. But
But I can tell you which one it is. No.
as a parent, you never try to have favorites. There are gonna be kids, even your own children, that you will click with or understand better or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you are purposely trying to deceive people and set up, you know, pit your kids against each other as Rebecca did. I think if she'd have just left well enough alone, God would have worked it all out anyway. It's easy to judge Rebecca and Jacob for trying to force things to work out in their favor rather than trusting God. The greatest mistake we could make, however, is to act as though we could not be just like them. Instead, we should allow the Spirit of God to search our heart and reveal the areas of our life where we may be tempted to force our will instead of trusting God's. We should remember that trusting God to make good on His promises is an active rather than passive part of our faith. It is achieved only through the hard work of consistent prayer and meditating on His promises. It's safe to say that Rebecca and Jacob were not meditating on the promises of God when they set out to deceive Isaac. Recall a time when you caused unnecessary hurt by trying to take matters into your own hands rather than trusting in God's plan. Anybody? Or is I going to be the only brave soul to admit my mistakes?
Well, we all cause unnecessary hurt sometimes
Oh, yeah.
without even thinking that we're doing it. You know, I would never intentionally hurt somebody,
Right.
but I know I hurt people by my mouth, by my words, and I don't, you know, never do mean to do that. But
I almost wish Bob was here tonight because he gets it. We often think that if you could just explain it right or word it right, they would see your point of view and just do things different. And they don't. Do ya, hun?
Like little dog over the moon.
Yeah, there's some that I don't care. But yeah, you always think that if you could just get them to understand, and that comes into that pushing, well, tough, you know, if you can just get them to see reason, if you could just get them to, and, you know, and good luck. Yeah. And the truth is, if we had the power to change other people, I mean,
I would change
do we
so many.
actually have the power to change other people.
Would we really want to be responsible for the messes we would
Do
make?
we really want that on our hands anyway? I can't even change
I don't know.
myself. It requires me working and doing a lot of work with God to get things to change in me. So
Yeah.
how can I expect, if I have struggled with this person, how could I expect to change somebody else? Why are you laughing at what are my children saying online?
Actually, online's really quiet.
Nobody's
I'm
on.
just laughing because you know your life would be very boring without me.
My life would be without him.
And without Laura. I'm just kidding, Kathy.
I
had
have
to say
saved
that.
myself so much grief if I'd have truly gotten that many, many years ago. So much grief. And probably not made some of the messes that I made or contributed to.
Well, if I would learn to keep my mouth shut a long time ago, things would have been a lot different.
I say, God doesn't necessarily tell us to keep our mouths shut, but He would rather us talk to Him and not tell the people or not
Right,
to the people
right.
that we're trying to change, because it
Exactly.
doesn't do any good. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be times God says, no, you go confront this situation. But there, He's gonna tell you to do it, and He's gonna tell you to do it at the right time.
Yeah.
But, yeah. When I stopped pushing Him, that's when things changed.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had to be called out on it. Alright, and not by him, because I wasn't going to listen to him either. In what ways has jealousy over others having what you desire caused you to act in ways you regret? I don't know, I'm not so much of a
I'm not jealous.
material person, you know. I'm not one who just, I don't look, yeah, I think somebody, oh, that's a nice house. And usually if it's a big one, I'm glad I don't have to clean it. So, you know, I don't think I necessarily look at what other people have and think, I have to have that. There's a couple cameras I want, but you know, I'm not going to go into debt over them, so.
Betty, did I bring your black shawl in?
All right, how might learning to have greater trust in God and His plan help with the hurt you may have experienced or caused in the past? That's a good one. What do you think?
I have to trust in God all the time, because if I do and say what I want to,
If I said the thoughts that went through my head.
God's
Yeah.
going to give you the wisdom, and He's going to show you how to speak as far as going back and approaching the situation so that you can set the wrong things right.
Yeah. I have learned to pull myself out of things, to purposely disengage. Because, and sometimes, you know, even when somebody's trying to bait me into, nope, and I've learned to purposely disengage. But I've also learned to pray when I know I have to go into situations I don't want to be in. To pray first, and sometimes pray the entire way through, because I don't want to say something that is going to, you know, cause damage. And
Take you on.
it takes two to argue. Yeah, but it only takes one, usually me, to say
to start.
no. to just be done, to have enough of a certain situation or a difficult person, or you know, there's you know, unfortunately not everybody in your life is healthy. Not every person is going to respond in the way you want to even what God has told you to do. And you know, we haven't had a whole lot of pushback, my husband and I, for the decision to go into ministry. And I figured we would, but we really didn't. So, and I was like mentally trying to prepare myself, you know, because hey, we're not starting out at 20.
I didn't do that because I haven't told anybody besides a few.
We haven't started
Because I
out
know.
young, you know, this is like a second, you know, the second act, and we're starting. And you know, as far as we've already, you know, pretty much raised our kids with the exception of the 14-year-old, and pretty much, you know, and so now it's like, it seems silly to, oh, let's jump into something new now. But I expected a lot more pushback than we have received.
Oh gee, I went back to school, then I went to beauty college, then
Yeah.
I'm doing ministry online, and, you know.
I went back
I'm
to college
62.
25 years after I left.
Yeah,
And then not even working in that field because God said, well, that was nice for then and I'll use that, but this is what
Yeah.
you're doing. And okay, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that education to set up a really cool library at our church when we get it, but I'm just saying, you know, it's not my plan or what I thought, because my plan would have been completely different from where God is taking us. And yeah. I expected a lot more pushback, a lot more questions. What thoughts or habits do you need to let go of in order to grow in your trust of God in this area in your life? What do you think? This has been driving me crazy for like 20 minutes. What thoughts or habits? He's continually changing my thoughts on things. Usually when I think I got something figured out, he changes, gives you a different perspective. or tells me, nope, that's not the right attitude, Kathy.
He gives me perspective in my job. That's not the attitude to be having. You're supposed to love the people as they're throwing stuff at me.
It's not me, is it?
And that's no, but that is the honest truth. That's not an exaggeration or a funny
We'll
story.
see.
I literally got them out there throwing stuff at me now.
I need more life insurance on him about it.
So, you know, he's teaching me to look from perspective-wise to look
Right.
at them differently because he does.
Yeah.
Even though I want to throw my shovel at him 9 times out of 10, but
Yeah, sometimes seeing a different perspective on things requires a humbleness I don't want to have. Because you know, okay, God loves them, but right now I'm not very happy with them, and I don't really want to be nice and loving. And you know, if they're legit throwing things at you, you might want to stand up for yourself a tad bit. But you know, let's not be damaged. Your wife may not have a very proper perspective if you come home injured. Anyway, I'll show them the love of God. What areas of your life seem to be the most consistently difficult for you to trust God?
You what?
What areas of your life, am I on the right one? That's the one she pulled up for me. What areas of your life seem to be the most consistently difficult for you to trust God? Where is it hardest to trust Him?
self.
Self?
I think that would be a big one for most, if not all people, that
We could get out of our own way?
giving up yourself, like you said, moving aside and letting God take the wheel.
Yeah.
I think everyone struggles with that. I really do, because it's ingrained in us from birth.
For a long time, if it came to other people, there's like just this certain personality that I do not mix well with. And it is the prideful, boasting personalities. I saw that a lot on military bases. You know, these soldiers, some of them are the nicest guys in the world, and some of them are very full of themselves. And it was, it's difficult for me when they have this I'm all that attitude. Because I'm sitting there thinking, are you really? You know, this I know everything attitude. There's no humbleness. You can't tell them anything or teach them anything. I struggle with people with those attitudes because it's very, you know, all about them, very boastful, and, you know, it bothers me. So I've had to learn to be nice and shut up. Because engaging in conflict doesn't really help in those matters. They're not going to learn anything from you. In fact, most of them like to fight. So, other than that, I think I struggled in, you know, it depends on the situations, but there's certain things that at certain times God has asked me to do that I struggled. Tithing was hard for us at first. Tithing was very hard for us at first. Seemed like every time we'd start to tithe, you know, when we first became Christians and we learned about tithing, and we'd start to tithe consistently, and it wasn't just like, oh, we started to tithe, a car would break down. No, we'd start to tithe and my husband would lose his job, and, you know, every bill in the world would bombard us, and everything would break. It wouldn't just be the car, it would be the hot water heater blowing up in the basement at the same time, and every single time, it was like, if we tithe, our world's going to end in some way. I mean, we're going to have to spend half our time going back and forth to Lafayette with a sick kid, or Satan knew how to attack our finances in ways that just buried us every time. And I finally got to the point where I was like, I don't care, I'm tithing anyway. And if I starve, I starve. And then that's when it like broke it. But
You gotta trust God at the same time.
yeah,
When you're tithing, you gotta put it in and forget it.
yeah. But it literally, for us, it was not about we're giving of our money. It wasn't that we didn't want to. Literally, Satan
I
said,
know.
I do not want them to have any power in this area, so let me unleash everything I can. And it was definitely like a spiritual battle, but it was very physical. What I'm trying to figure out, okay, we can pay for gas or groceries, but not both, so, you know, for years, for at least, 3 or 4 years, easy. It was just non-stop, but in some way we went through it for a lot longer than that. It took a long time before we got to a point where we could tithe and not then look around wondering when the next shoe was gonna drop. Because that's what I always felt like. Usually, and I've seen this in my life, but I also see it in my kids' lives, anytime they take a step towards something God has told them to do, they get pushed back in many, many ways. And for like my older two, it's always their help. Always their help. You know, Tasha's taken a step in ministry, and she has had one of the roughest years she's had in probably 7 or 8, with, 4 surgeries in 2 months, and, now off work till June, and, the second she took a step forward in obedience, Satan said, no, I'm gonna try and stop it. And I don't think she's ever meant to stop, but it definitely slowed her down a while. And I've seen it with Kim. She takes a step forward, and then suddenly she's got a kidney stone she's got to have, broken up, and he's learned how to go after my older girls with their help. It's frustrating. I'm not quite sure how to break that off of them, except for just keep praying. What about you guys? What's consistently harder for you?
I forgot the question.
What areas of your life seem to be the most consistently difficult for you to trust God?
Definitely with my kids and grandkids. I trust him with them. I don't mean it like that.
But they don't cooperate?
But, well, yeah. If they're gonna cooperate and think it's gonna make me happy, they're gonna change their mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a hard time letting go of my kids and my grandkids. If I can make it better, I will.
Right.
I hate that, because, then you got one that relies on you 24/7, then you got one that never relies on you, and
you would think that, oh, he doesn't need me, that would be a good problem, but it's not.
it's
Sometimes
not,
just as
because
hard.
sometimes it's just as hard, yeah.
Yeah.
And, it sounds rough, but when my son was drinking, I felt needed, I guess, because I pray for him just as much now, but it seemed like I was constantly, all day long, saying, God, please let him be okay. Please let him not drink, or please let, whatever.
Right.
Even though I still do that now, I have a hard time just saying, okay, God, they're yours, and whatever you want to do with them is okay, because I know that minute he could take them away from me.
It is much harder to, in some ways it's easier to say, okay, God, I'll deal with whatever, than it is to watch your kids go through it. By the same token, I think that, my older 2 girls, they've kept me in prayer a lot through their lives because of their health issues and stuff. But, I look at Megan, and I tried not to, with my older 2 ones, I was a lot more authoritative, I guess. As they say, Megan gets away with murder compared to what we got away with, Mom. So, when I
Well,
look
she
at...
should be your favorite then, instead of Laura.
Anyway.
Just
You're
wear
gonna
you
get in
down
trouble
there.
Sometimes you're just tired, okay? But I try to handle things differently with them, instead of it just being, there are times where it's, no, you're not doing that, no, you're not wearing that. But, I try to handle things different, and try to go to God with things, instead of just, being the overbearing evil mother that, my older ones probably thought I was. But, like I said, then it looks like she gets away with murder. Maybe I've just learned to pick my battles.
Yeah.
All right, think on this thought from our listening community time. Trusting God to make good on His promises is an active rather than passive part of our faith. In other words, it is achieved only through the hard work of consistent prayer. ways are higher than our ways. Despite our feelings at times, God is not being slow to accomplish his plans. Ultimately, God is good, and so are his plans for us. And though the righteous will face trials, God will rescue us. And then they say, consider writing down these scriptures. Okay. The song that came out last year from Maverick City, who's heard the song Wait on You? Okay, if you get a chance to listen to it, I know DJ's heard it. DJ has to play it.
I probably do. I probably am.
I fell in love with that song because it literally is, not only does it quote scripture in the verse or in the chorus, but it talks about, all the times we were waiting on God and God had a different plan than what, we thought or what, the doctor said or what the, situation looked how it was going to come out. And, so many times the waiting is the hardest part.
Yep.
Rebecca and Jacob were not patient. Just like Abraham and Sarah were not patient and created an Ishmael. Rebecca and Jacob, they created their own issues, where then Jacob had to run for his life for many, many years. We have so many times where we create problems because we don't wait well. And I like how it says it's an active rather than a passive thing. I mean, what are we supposed to do while we wait? Couple of songs, because there's also that one from Fireproof that talks about how we wait. How are we supposed to wait when we're waiting on God? We're supposed to wait by serving. We're supposed to wait by praying, by worshiping and praising. We're supposed to be active in waiting. And I think the key to that is giving it to God in the waiting. Keep giving it to God. And then going on with life and doing good in life and serving God in life while we're waiting for him to work. So, that's how I have to look at it when I'm starting to get frustrated or fearful that this person is not going to come to Christ like I think. They're not. Their attitude, I can't see any sign that God's working in their life. And, I want to take matters in my own hands, and I know that's a mistake, and so that's when I'm like, okay, what else can I do? I can pray for them, trust God, and go, do something over here. And that's what Rebecca and Jacob should have done. All right. God uses all kinds of people in his plans. The Old Testament makes it very clear that he isn't limited to exclusively working through the firstborn son, regardless of ancient cultural norms. God changed the younger brother Jacob's name to Israel, and Jacob's descendants became the nation through whom Jesus would bring God's promised salvation to Israel and the whole world. God used Jacob's wife Rachel, a younger sister, to miraculously give birth to Joseph, who later fulfilled God's plan to provide his people with food during famine. This will be next week. Moses, with the assistance of his older siblings, would take point on leading God's people into the promised land, and the youngest son of Jesse, David, would eventually become the greatest king the nation of Israel would ever have. Alrighty. So, this week, try to go through your devotions every day. Next week, we get to go to Joseph, one I actually prepared for. And I felt God gave me some good stuff for it too. So hopefully he doesn't change it. All right, Facebook, we're done. We'll see you next week.